Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, collaboration to cash in on the Made in Canada defense strategy. But first, from the Premier announcing a multi-question fall referendum, to the destruction of controversial pain and fever medicine, the return of EV rebates, and the uncomfortable spotlight on Canadian curlers at the Olympics. Let's kick off the program with our Primetime This Week panel. And joining us this evening, Ellen Parker, founder and CEO of Parker PR in Calgary, and Darren Krause is the editor and founder of Livewire Calgary. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the Premier's televised address, a prelude to the next sitting of the legislature, which gets underway Monday, and it had a significant focus on what she calls out-of-control federal immigration policies.
The fact is, Alberta taxpayers can no longer be asked to continue to subsidize the entire country through equalization and federal transfers, permit the federal government to flood our borders with new arrivals, and then give free access to our most generous in the country social programs to anyone who moves here.
The issue of immigration was a key discussion point during last year's Alberta Next panels, and Danielle Smith wants Albertans to weigh in further, announcing an October 19th referendum featuring 9 questions, including whether the province should take increased control over immigration, another on restricting social services for some immigrants, and whether non-permanent residents should be charged a fee to access health and education systems.
I want you to know how confident I am in the judgment of Albertans on these and other delicate issues. Although there are some politicians and commentators that fear direct democracy, such as referendums, I do not. I trust the judgment of Albertans.
Now, some critics call the messaging politically calculated to make immigration a clear scapegoat for a multi-billion-dollar deficit ahead of next week's provincial budget. And as for the perspective of the opposition,
after watching the Premier's address last night, Alberta's NDP have this to say: cut the bull and call the election. The Premier is trying to distract us ahead of a UCP budget that will contain billions of dollars in deficits. She's trying to distract us from separatism, which she put on the agenda and is already putting our province at risk.
The government is also asking Albertans to vote on seeking constitutional amendments, giving provinces the right to choose King's Bench justices, abolishing the Senate, and allow jurisdictions to opt out of federal programs without losing federal funds. Ellen, I'll start with you. What strikes you about the tone of the address, and how do you see this going over with Albertans?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, again, very divisive. I feel like, her tone was quite directive. She seemed very confident in this approach. She did appear and tried to present herself as a listener, really kind of zoning in on the fact that she was just responding to a number of people's questions and interests in this activity through these panels that have happened through the province. It's interesting, I have a few new Canadians on my team who are absolutely amazing. So I had them kind of weigh in. And yeah, we kind of came to this conclusion as a group that she's trying to appear like a listener, but of course it's very divisive, especially around the immigration policies that she may be proposing. But she is saying it's up to Albertans ultimately, and whichever way it goes, it's our decision.
Darren, how do you see this batch of 9 referendum questions playing if there is also a vote October 19th on separation? Should the petition that's currently circulating be successful this spring?
Well, I think what we've seen from Danielle Smith's UCP government is a carefully orchestrated, deliberate path to creating and implementing a viable path to separation. And this latest salvo is another step in that direction. We've got the Alberta Police Force. We've got the Alberta Pension Plan talks. We've got this immigration policy. It's a setup ultimately for people to say, we're already this far along, we might as well go the full distance. And that kind of goes with the constitutional questions that are going to be asked as well. And what's worse is all of this is being disguised as direct democracy. And that's just a defense so politicians can say, this is what you asked us to do, when the reality is, how many Albertans are actually going to vote in this? Maybe 30, 40, 50%. So it doesn't reflect the will of all Albertans.
Okay, so Ellen, above and beyond this element of referendums, what kind of stage do you see this setting for the session ahead? And that's especially coming off the sitting in the fall that had its fair share of controversy. notwithstanding the notwithstanding clause.
Yeah, I agree with Darren. And I also think that it's really what she's trying to do is say, I'm a listener now, and I made this decision before, but now I'm asking you to show up and make this decision and weigh in. So maybe in her own, from her perspective, she's trying to come across as more collaborative, potentially. Again, like I said before, I think it's creating a lot of division.
All right. Now, sticking with provincial politics, controversial children's pain and fever medicine has been destroyed. It was back in 2022 when the government placed a $70 million order for liquid acetaminophen from Turkey because of a shortage of children's pain meds here at home. But by the time the first of the shipments arrived, the shortage was over. And while put to use in Alberta hospitals, it was also pulled from neonatal intensive care units because of concerns over the clogging of feeding tubes. Roughly half of the remaining 1.4 million bottles were eventually donated to countries like Ukraine, but the province now confirms the rest has been destroyed because it was set to expire. And the cost? $718,000. Now, the opposition calls the whole process a waste of public money. It should also be noted this deal factors into ongoing procurement scandal investigations by the Auditor General and the RCMP. But Darren, is this one of those situations where Albertans are likely to forget anytime soon? How do you see it factoring into the political dynamic?
No, this isn't one that Albertans will forget about, mainly because this is the poster child of the missteps, we'll call them, and that's being gratuitous to the UCP, the missteps they've made on this file going all the way back to COVID. As long as people are talking about Alberta's COVID response, they will bring up, oh, remember that time during COVID where we made that ridiculous purchase of kids' pain meds that cost taxpayers $70 million and none of it could be used? That's what we'll be talking about as we continue to dissect Alberta's COVID response for years to come.
Ellen, lessons to be learned here by the provincial government? What do you make of how all of this is played out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the other side of that is it was, the intention was good initially. I do think that there are way other things we spent way more money on, and every level of government is absolutely at fault at overspending, in my opinion. I do think that this may be a distraction and a way for the opposition to, throw the UCP under the bus and try to paint them in a bad light as overspenders, which some people may think is slightly ironic coming from the NDP government. So just some other things to consider and kind of things that I'm curious about.
All right, time for us to take a quick break. But when we come back, efforts to encourage the embrace of electric vehicles and the buzz over Olympic curling. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. What's old is new again. The federal electric vehicle rebate program is back after having been paused just last year.
With the cost of living crisis that we're in, anything that the government can do to help move this along, we see as a good thing.
Well, the federal government is hoping to boost EV sales. It's an industry struggling to hit the highway.
Canada-wide, 14% of all new vehicles are EVs, but what we're seeing in Alberta is around 4%.
Provinces like Ontario and BC offer rebates. No such incentive exists here, and infrastructure in Alberta remains an issue with only 1,500 charging stations province-wide.
If I compare that to BC, they're sitting well over 8,000, and in Quebec, well over 10,000. So fear around a range anxiety and ability to charge is problematic here because, frankly, there just aren't enough charging points.
The return of the federal rebate program will see buyers receiving up to $5,000 for battery electric vehicles and up to $2,500 for plug-in hybrids. Ellen, what's your read on the readiness, the willingness of Albertans to embrace electric vehicles? Is the return of this rebate program enough to jumpstart sales?
Well, I think it's realistic to look at, our landscape here in Alberta. We have many rural people working in rural communities. It's very cold here. Albertans like their big trucks. So the climate here is a bit different. And I think the philosophy with many of our conservative Albertans is that We don't want to have this extra spending, and it's not really the government's job to distribute taxpayer dollars. This is something that kind of the free market can manage and companies can invest in. So overall, I think when technology improves and it's more sustainable in cold weather conditions, there might be more appetite.
Darren, from a consumer perspective, do you ever see a day when electric vehicle sales lead the way in Alberta?
And no, largely for a lot of the reasons that Ellen had pointed out, but I'll tell you what another reason is. We just recently went on a little bit of a car finding journey. It was not a pleasant experience, largely because you can't find a new vehicle that suits the needs of a family like ours for under $40,000. I mean, I see some new vehicles that are around $80,000 to $90,000, and if you're looking for an EV, you've got to get one of the newer versions in order to address all the concerns that Ellen brought up. So unless that credit or the rebate is like $20,000, I can't see it having any impact on electric vehicle sales here in the province.
All right. One more topic. While the Olympics are winding to a close, Canada's still in the hunt for medals. One sport in particular has a lot of people talking.
I don't think there's ever been this much coverage in curling. Ever.
Ever, indeed. That is the voice of Alberta curling legend Randy Ferbey commenting on a claim by Sweden that Canada's Mark Kennedy gave his rock an extra illegal push. We can only show still images of Olympic action, but at least one video replay out there appears to show the competitor from Alberta poking the granite part of the rock.
It's so far from cheating that it's ridiculous, but it is an infraction. But that infraction is almost impossible to call.
Another Alberta curler, John Morris, has 2 Olympic gold medals to his name and is a former teammate of Mark Kennedy's.
It doesn't have really any impact at all on the result of the stone. And now at the world's biggest stage, it's kind of created a bit of a fiasco, which I think has been not an awesome distraction for a lot of the curlers.
A profanity-laced defense by Kennedy also landed Kennedy a verbal warning from World Curling, and he's since expressed regret over the outburst. As for what's to come from the alleged infraction as the sport moves forward?
I don't know what the answer is, but obviously you got to address this because it could get ugly in time. People are not going to forget this.
The Canadian rink, by the way, playing for gold on Saturday. Darren, surprised to see an Albertan in the thick of all of this?
Well, you know what, Michael? My mom always taught me that the ferociousness of your defense is usually commensurate with your level of guilt. Not to say that there was necessarily a touch of the rock. Not surprised that it's Albertan, but I mean, surprised in general that it's Canadian. We're generally a congenial bunch. But the reality is, the rule is there. The rule is a rule, despite what Canadian curling royalty wants to or how they want to view it. I was just surprised by the incident more than anything, and then equally surprised by the response.
Indeed. Okay, so Ellen, what do you see this controversy doing for the sport of curling?
To be honest with you guys, I'm not totally privy to all the curling nuances. However, I think it will become more memorable. People are talking about it, so it's kind of PR for curling in a way. Maybe they could create funny memes and use it in another kind of PR way. But to Darren's point, Canadians are typically very polite. So it's just a different situation for us.
We are polite, but we also take our curling very seriously. Darren,
apparently,
beyond the curling controversy, what registers as maybe a memorable moment for you from these games in Milano Cortina?
Well, I am going to say that the memorable moment has not yet come, hopefully because we want to see the Canadian men's hockey team bring home the gold medal this weekend.
Yeah, that's the kind of the bottom line, isn't it, Ellen? Or what's your memorable moment?
Well, it would be today when McKinnon scored the winning goal against Finland in the last 35 seconds.
Yeah, that was a pretty close one, wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
Folks, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you kindly and hope you have an awesome weekend. And Darren, get better.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.